Let's move to our next session. Same thing, parallel. There's a presentation in Salle Pastel and there's one here. Here we'll move to robots serving fruits and vegetables production. And the moderator of this panel will be David Frabotta. He's the Editorial Market Development Director of MEISTER Media.
Sophie, thank you very much for that introduction. For those of you who do not know me, my name is David Frabotta. I work with MEISTER Media. I oversee several brands, including Precision Ag. I also work with Agribusiness Global and some of our other grower magazines. We've been covering precision agriculture for 25 years, and we're very excited about the technology of robotics and the potential it has to really create better solutions for farmers in a time where they are challenged by loss of chemistries, environmental concerns, and other stories that robotics tell a very good story in a time when agriculture doesn't have a lot of good stories to tell. So we are very excited about it. We believe there's a confluence of factors that are hitting a threshold at the right time for increased adoption. And here to help me tell a little bit about what that adoption looks like and how those factors are affecting their business is our panel. I'd like them to introduce themselves, but I will introduce them first. Jean INDERCHIT is with NAïO Technologies. He's product manager for DINO, which is one of their autonomous robots. We have Céline with SYHA, Céline Francesca with SYHA. She's Chief Operating Officer, and her robot is primarily for greenhouse tomatoes. And José Miguel Arizabalo Barra, and he is our person who is going to ground truth whether or not this technology is applicable in a vertically integrated berry farm that's also a food processing facility, right? So thank you for all of us. I'd like you all to take a turn in extending who you are, what your company does. Tell me a little bit about your technology that you're talking about here today, your robots, and give me one good thing that's happened recently. Tell me about one victory that you've had, whether it's technological, operational. Tell us a little about yourself. Jean, you could start.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Jean. I'm the product manager for the DINO robot. I work at NAïO Technologies. So DINO robot is a straddling platform for vegetables, mainly focusing on lettuce as of now. So we've been working on robots at NAïO for quite some time. We started in 2011. Starting with a little robot called Oz. Oz is mostly for smaller farms between 2 to 10 hectares, and DINO is focusing on bigger farms for about farms that are about 50 hectares. So the platform is targeting a first job, a really important job, which is mechanical weeding. And it's really important for us to develop that robot with and keeping in mind that we want to do one job good first, and then using that platform into other tasks like, for example, fertilizing and so on. We've started with the DINO in 2015, 2016 approximately. Started only in France. We've had lots of good feedback on the robots. We've developed a few versions. We're at version 3 now of the robots, of the platform. And we are continuously improving it. And we started recently going into other markets, like the US, for example, which is a big market for us for lettuce. So we talked about a big win. A big win for us, I think, would be having happy customers. because of course we make really technologically advanced robots, which is an achievement in itself, which is really great. But what really is our end goal is to have happy customers, and it's not always easy, especially in farming, where you have difficulties putting robots, and we're going to talk about it. So yeah, having a good feedback from a customer that says to you, okay, your machine works in my field, I'm really happy for this season. So that's really a big win for us.
Thank you. Me, I'm Céline FRANQUESA, so I'm the CEO of SYHA. So SYHA was created more than two years and a half ago. What we are doing is that we are developing harvesting robots for high-tech greenhouses to help farmers address workforce shortage and also help them improve their competitivity. So our first robot that we developed, it's a robot that is able to harvest tomatoes in the vine, but tomatoes that are grown, like said David, in high-tech greenhouses. Where we are now currently, we are developing our second prototype. So we are still developing it. It's still a work in progress, but well, it's okay, and it's normal because it's long to develop a robot that is really working, that meets all the needs of the customers. And maybe a big success that we had during this year is that we managed to work very closely with the customers. So in fact, we every 3 months we meet big customers, so French one, and we discuss with them the development that we've made, and we define with them exactly what are their needs, and so we are sure that what we develop is really meeting their needs. So this is, and for us, this is really something very important.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for myself and HORTIFRUT to be here at FIRA. Well, my role at HORTIFRUT is the CIO. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the company. Well, HORTIFRUT is a producer company. We produce all kind of berries. We have in total about 80 millions of kilos produced per year. We have about 7,500 hectares owned by our company or our partners. So we produce berries in almost all the continents. So we are leading the industry of berry, and that's been a big challenge in every aspect that we work, and that includes robotics. That's why we are here. That's why we are trying to see how we can push and make the leading part of the business also in robotics. About the challenge or the vision, in HORTIFRUT we have a dream, and that dream means that we want to have a robotic solution for blueberry harvesting. That's our big goal. We know that it is a complex challenge, but we are working on that, and as first step for that, we are working on a spray robotic solution at this time.
Great, thank you. Can you tell me, Jose, just a little bit more on how many hectares do you have under cultivation, how many employees, and using the spray robotics, what phase is it in, how long have you been using it, and how's it going?
Okay. Well, this is a very good question, actually, because the berries industry around the world is a very manual process. And to have an idea, just to give an example of our bigger farm in Peru, we used to have around 20,000 people per day in the peak season. We are talking about 20,000 people harvesting berries. So that's a huge amount of people. And that means it is a complexity in every aspect regarding to harvesting, which means you need to transport people, you need to feed people, you need to accommodate people, you need to make all the aspects in order to have right harvesting in the field. So as we know, with the labor constraints, labor regulation is getting more and more complex. That's why we are looking for a different kind of solution where we can have a harvesting process in a different way by using technology or robotic solutions. In that sense, to see how technology can help us is a priority for our company.
So we see the level of complexity and the challenge that large growing operations face. When the manufacturers are out in the field and we're discussing the value proposition that these machines take, what does that conversation look like with your clients, your end users, with the value chain? How do you articulate the real benefit of these machines in a way where a producer is willing to accept that message?
So, well, we have a few arguments for a few aspects of the robots that are really interesting. Is that you reduce soil compaction, and we've talked about that in the previous topics. There's also the ability to reduce chemicals in the fields. But there's also a really important aspect, and we talked about it, that's the workforce, the labor shortage that the world is facing in farming and agriculture. But when you face a farmer with your robot and that you start building a conversation with him and how you're going to put the robot in his field, those conversations, they don't really go around those topics first. They go around, okay, on the day-to-day operations, how is it going to operate? When do I bring it to the charging station? What do I do with it if there's a safety issue? So for us, we know that we have the platform, there's a market there that's ready to accept robotics in their farms, but we still need to find the right way to put the robots in their fields. And that's really important because it's different in each and every one country. Well, we've operated robots in France for quite some time now, started using it in the US, and we were off, a little bit off sometimes because we didn't know how they used to work, how do they irrigate their fields, how do you map the field with GPS or TK, for example. So that's really a challenge. And I think that's really surprising because we have this idea of farming being kind of an ancient world from time to time, and that's absolutely not the case. Everybody's ready for it. And there's just, I guess it's just now more of a pull than push technologies. So it's really interesting. And it has changed in just a few years. I mean, we started in 2011. People were kind of laughing when we showed our robots in 2012 at the first fairs. And now they're just asking lots of questions about them and lots of questions about how to put it in their fields, how it's going to work. So it has changed. And now it's just a matter of what's the best way to put the robot in their fields, because they mostly focus on day-to-day operations and how it's going to affect their lives.
So this is an important point about understanding each individual operation, right? A lot of times as manufacturers, especially technology manufacturers, we tend to fall in love with our own creations, and we like to talk about the product instead of reversing the conversation and talking about the solutions. Selena, you have a lot of experience understanding individual operations, and it's essential for your highly specialized product. Can you talk a little bit about that process of understanding the grower, the client, and how it affects your R&D?
So us, what we are doing, as I was explaining, is that every 3 months we meet them. But between these 3 months, what we do is that every 2 or 3 weeks, we go and test our robot in one of the greenhouse, and in fact, and so we can see in real life how it is working, and what is not working at all. And sometimes we think, we should, maybe if we do this task like that, well, the customers will be okay. But after, when we explain them and we show them what the robot for now is able to do, and they tell us, yes, we can agree on that part or not. And well, sometimes it's not easy for us because we thought that this point was closed and we should move on to the next task. But in fact, no, it's not the point. And well, for us, this is what we are doing and how we are working. And I think it's really good because what is really important is that we make sure that when the robot is ready, the customer will be there to buy it. Because if we have a robot that does not meet their needs, and well, no one will want to buy our robot. So, well, this is how we are working.
Jose, you're nodding a bit. Tell me, when you're working with a manufacturer and you're looking for technology to adopt in your operation, what are some of the touch points that you need to hear to trust the vendor, to trust the technology? How long do they need to invest in understanding your operation?
Well, as explaining here, it is right. There are some particularities or complexities that you will see only on the fields. In our case, we have production on the soil. We have production on pods and also on tunnels. So from a robotics or technological standpoint, there are different challenges behind of that. So that's why it is very important to be close to the reality and to see how robots work on the field. Also, we have different varieties of berries. So most of them are quite small, are fragile, but it depends of the variety. They will be a bit bigger, strong. They are behind the tree. So all of those details, it is almost impossible to catch in a conversation or in a meeting. You need to be on the farm and you need to adapt the solution and test it. So for me, and answering your question, there is not a solution that you can buy and put on the farm and works well at the just one step. There is an investigation, and your provider need to work with you in order to put the robot or the solution on the farm and see how it works and be flexible to adapt and make all the changes and test it until you get a final and perfect solution.
So that's a really interesting point, is that every farmer has specific points that he needs to address in his field. And it's really important as a company because, well, we have, of course, engineers in the company. We have also kind of experts in farming. And it's really important to just take a step back and just check if your robots does meet the needs, or if you need to review certain functionality of the robots, because most of the time, lots of people, they want really specific points to be addressed. And you haven't thought about it until you put your robot in the field. So really also extremely important, and we've done that a lot at NAIO, is even if it's not completed yet, just put it out, make it work in the field, to check that everything is here and that you have targeted the right functionality for the farmer. That's really, really important. And it's difficult because sometimes you have to question decisions that you made 3 years ago because you were focusing on a specific market, and then you are rethinking everything. So it's pretty hard.
This is an excellent point. You've been with the DINO robot from the beginning. And did you ever anticipate that you would have to customize an application to this extent for every individual operation? And how does your support network change, or your support policies, how have they changed as a result of understanding this is perhaps a lifelong partnership you have with your clients?
Yes, so it's really challenging because when you put a robot out in the fields, you certainly know that you don't have enough feedback on the robot, and you know that it's not going to last for 7 years in the fields like a tractor would do, for example. So you must target the right people that are willing to go with you and are willing to kind of take the challenge of using that robot. It's not easy because it does have an impact on their lives, but in the end, it's a really good experience. And I think that's really important, is providing a really good experience. If the robot does not provide a good experience, do this with the support team. I mean, sometimes it may be a response that is acceptable for the farmer, and that's really also important. So we've had lots of issues with the robots in the past years, and as they get more and more reliable, you have to think about the robots that are out, that are not up to date, and you need to kind of retrofit them, put more add-ons on them. So it's also in the regard of product management and the versions that are out, it's quite challenging also, because everyone again wants specific solutions. So at some point you got to question, okay, where am I going? Where's the product is going? What market am I addressing? Am I targeting the right market? Is there enough people that are willing to accept this solution right now? If so, then I'll just push the robot out and see what happens.
It's a process of continuous improvement. It sounds like you talked about some smirks maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even as few as 7 years ago. People are laughing at the robots, and now they're looking at them and they're accepting them. Selena, you've talked about farmers being skeptical of the technology, and perhaps we need an understanding that not all of these robots are going to be perfect all the time. How do you prepare customers for that process of continuous improvement that you'll walk them through so that everything will eventually serve the solutions that they originally purchased the machines for? Yeah.
So what we are doing is that we explain them. We don't want to lie to them and to tell them, okay, in 2 years you will have the perfect robot that will harvest 100% of the tomatoes of your greenhouse. No, this is not the reality. So what we do, yes, we explain them that it will be little by little, that at the beginning the robot will not be perfect, and maybe there will be additional tasks at the beginning they will have to do, well, not them, but the workers will have to do to help the robots, and that little by little, with the new version, the robot will be more autonomous, you know. And I think so. What is important is that every company that is building a robot works with his clients and explaining them what is really going on. But also, I think all of the conference, the events like the FIRA, it's a really, it's something that we all have to do. In fact, all the ecosystem has to do, so that everyone, all the farmers, the one who breed, apples, tomatoes, or whatever, lettuce, that they all understand that it is something complicated, and that we need some time, and that we need also some early adopters, you know, as first clients, and who are ready to accept that, nothing will be perfect at the beginning. Maybe you want
Yeah, Jose, you've talked about the customization that needs to happen for each individual operation. Is this, when you hear manufacturers saying, okay, it's not going to work perfectly all the time, is this a point of concern, or does that alleviate your concern that they're going to continue to work to make it right?
To be honest, both. And why that? Because we are from the technology part, so we know that innovation and technology and software is not gonna work perfectly at the first step. So we are clear on that, and we know that, and we appreciate that. However, we have a company and we have a board, and what the board expects is something different. They want to have a business case, they want to have a timeline, they want to have our results, and why this is complicated innovations and robotics in the formal companies. So we are in a very traditional business where they used to buy a farm, a field, they put some plants, and after some time they have fruits. And it's very clear, and you have a ROI, you have a very specific timeline for that. However, in this kind of project, you don't. So that is why I'm said both. For me, it's clear, but to sell, to buy in a board in regarding this kind of project is quite complex, and this is a big challenge for the people who work in a company and need to get approval and need to get budget from a formal committee or from a formal board.
What's your expectation of product support during installation and perhaps into perpetuity? You know, do you expect a lifelong support from a manufacturer?
Yes, of course, we expect support. I'm very glad to hear that the robot business is moving as robotic as a service, which means you are not selling a robot and then you are on your own to maintain and operate the robot. Now the robotic solutions are in place with your field, and you maintain the support, and the manufacturer is still with you, and this is part of the business. And also, in that case, it means that you will not have a big investment at the beginning. So glad to hear about that. I believe that it will be a bit easier for us to be part of that business. However, still being the point that you raise, we need to have support. And in our case, most of our farms are in America and in South America. As I told you, our bigger farm is in Peru, is actually the biggest farm for berries in the world. And the manufacturers are not in South America. They are in America, in Europe. So there is a distance constraint. And we know that it's not easy for our manufacturer, but we know that they need to be with us in our farm to be successful.
Let's talk a little bit about value chain creation. There are different mechanisms to distribute products, services, and mechanization through agriculture in various countries, sometimes depending on the country, sometimes depending on the region. How do you anticipate the value chain to be created for these very sophisticated robots?
So first, we didn't. we didn't really anticipate it. We've started by selling the robots, and then we are kind of trying different types of models, like rental, selling, and also services. Because, as you said, there are specific needs in different countries. People are used to work with one model more than with another. And what's important is to remember that the farmers, they expect the product to work or the service to work. They don't really, most of them are in their own right, and they just want to have a solution that is going to increase their yield, for example. So if you provide a machine that doesn't work, you need to provide the right support for it. If you provide a service, you need to make sure that you have maybe 2 robots at the same place to ensure that the right job is done. So we are not sure yet that there's one right way to do it. It really depends on the country, and as you said, it's a very, very long process to test also those models with the farmers, because you can't just go in their farms and just show them a paper. You need to approach them, have a discussion, build up a relationship was also really important, because most of the time they've never heard of the robot, they don't know who is NAIO Technologies, and it's kind of new for them. So it's, yeah, building up a relationship and really meet their expectation. If they just want for example, mechanical weeding to be done, whatever, whatever the tools or stuff like that, you just propose a service, for example. But some of them, they want to own a machine, for example. So yeah, you really have to target, or not target, but you really have to get a good description of how it works currently in the country or in the region, and just try a few things. We have never sold one robot on a fair, for example, or first time we come to a partner and just show him the robot that never works. It's part of it is really building a relationship, explaining what's going to happen, and proposing different models. That's really important, because currently I don't think that anyone in the robotics world, robotics for farming, has found the right solution that works every time. So it's still building up, I think.
So Selena, you are in the concept stage still with your robot. I imagine that'll be direct to consumer for some time until you're able to commercialize. Have you thought about what the distribution system looks like for hothouse?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I think it will be, well, it will depend, of course, of maybe on the countries, but what we see is that at one point, well, in the horticultural world, it's a small world, so there are some big players, and for example, there are big companies that are building these high-tech greenhouses. And so we know that at one point, we'll have to work with them, because now when there is a new greenhouse that is built, well, there are these suppliers that build this greenhouse. But what they may do in the future is also that they can sell our robots in this new greenhouse. So is it selling or robot as a service? We don't know yet, because we'll see, and I think it will depend on the countries and maybe on the customers. But yes, this is something we know that we won't be able to do it all by ourselves. We'll need to integrate in the existing ecosystem and to find the best way to sell our robot or our service. Well, it's the same, but yes, it's like that we see it.
Is this a problem, Jose, for farm operators about how to learn about and access some of these advanced technologies where a value chain has not been created yet?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Because I believe that there is a challenge on our side in order to get a funding budget for this kind of project, that it is not clear what is at the end the value chain. For them also, because if they cannot calculate, and I imagine that it is complex to do that, and they don't know how they will launch a product and what will be the customers. So we have in both sides complexities. So in my opinion, the unique way to see how we can solve the issue is trying to work together. For me, collaboration is clear here. Is key here in order to see how we can try to be very transparent and see what are we expecting, what are the value behind of that, and also in your side to see how the product will be at the end, how much will be the cost, and how will be the timeline for that. And for me, the unique way here is critical, and that's we are here at FIRA, is how we can collaborate and working together in order to see how we can fit both sides of the equation, and also trying to scale this. I believe if we scale this, it will be more simple to get a business case in order to see what will be your potential customers and see what will be the solution as global markets. So for me, this is very critical today, is how we co-innovate, collaborate, and see how we can scale and be more effective, efficient in order to address the question that you have on your side and the question we have in our side.
So we have just about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&A. So if you do have questions, there are people in the audience who will find you and interrupt me and start to ask questions of our panel. We want to make this as interactive as possible to make sure you're getting the information out of our guests that you need. So while you're formulating, do we have one?
I'm René Koerhuis, I'm an editor of Future Farming magazine. And I would like to know if we look in agriculture, we have a certain standardization. We have an Arizabalo standard, we have a Hitch standard for a long time already, PTO standard. Will we need a certain standard for robotization, to make adoption by farmers more easy? And if so, how long does it take to make such a standard?
Who would like to tackle the standardization question?
That's a really interesting question. Céline and I are both from companies that are pretty young, and when we start building robots, we don't think about standardization at all. When we started, because we didn't have time for that. We needed to push the robot in the fields as quickly as possible. Now we realize that some standards are already out there for tractors, for example, and we need to address that issue. But it's kind of hard because there are a lot of standards that are not here yet for robots, and that need to be built. So it's also discussion between companies like SYHA and NAIO Technologies, for example, in order to build those partnerships and to build those standards. I think it's going to take time because it's always a balance between taking the time to get the machine reliable with standards on the robots, and the balance of having it working in the fields just by yourself. So yes, there need to be something created. And it's not just the Hitch, for example, it's a whole ecosystem communication between robots and platforms, for example, for collecting data, communication between drones and robots, for example. So there are a lot of areas where we need to build a standard. But we're still small companies, I think, and we really need help from bigger companies that have the strength to build those standards, that are more keen also to build them because they have the workforce.
Yes, this is an enormous an enormous concern among a lot of technologies. I think the big companies are still addressing this in the United States, where some of the adoption of various technologies a little bit further along. And we've just started to develop committees for interoperability. So, Jose, I wonder, how much of a concern is this for you? How much time do you spend analyzing whether or not systems are open, architecture is compatible with forward-looking technologies that you might not know you need yet?
It is a very important point, because at the end what we want to have is a digital farming, and in order to have a digital farming, you will have different devices or different solutions, and you need that all of them can work together and provide information between them, and then you have a big piece of information where you can manage your farm and make decisions. So it is very, very important to have those standards in place. And for me, that's maybe is something that is on big companies and also on the academic research. I mean, universities. In some cases, university helps in trying to make some standards, and then the industry follow those standards. So here, for me, there is also a university support that it's need for robotics, for robotic development.
So a third party who can help vet how the technology works together? Or just extension services being able to integrate the technology into basic practices?
Yeah, it can be an extended services, but however, if you don't have the right standard of the right technology, it will be more complex trying to communicate them or integrate them. So for me, I know that this is a very young industry, but we need to take in account the standards and see how those standards will meet the necessity or the needs of the industry. There is a very good point that we need to take care about that also.
And just to contribute to that question, I think that big companies have already kind of started working on it with the drones industry, which has created already a small ecosystem, and maybe the robots we build can integrate into that system and communicate with the whole ecosystem. So it might be a starting point.
I know these platforms are sophisticated, and you're not going to be able to invent everything yourself. And at some point, partners are going to be needed for the full integration for production systems. I did see some hands in the air, I think.
Yeah, Rich Martin Hempel with Ag Funder News. My question is about your interactions with investors. And often when I ask investors whether they're interested in certain agri-robot technologies, they answer with a simple and slightly lazy answer of hardware is hard. I was wondering how your companies work to counter that perception.
A really interesting question. I'd rather have the CEO talk about it. But yes, most of our investors or the people, the investors we were talking with, they all say hardware is hard, really, because you make a hardware platform, it lasts for 2 years, and then it breaks in the fields, and then you have to rethink it again and do another completely different stuff. So it may seem like a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of money, but then I think for us it has been a starting point, building our own platform, because we knew what we needed to put in the field as a minimum value product, just to check that the market was there, just to check that how it was working in the fields. So that was the first step. And then if we look further, I'm not saying that we won't be able to build the whole fleet of robots of NAIO technologies ourselves, but we see ourselves more as integrators, and I'm not sure that we can ourselves build hundreds and hundreds of robots, of NAIO technologies robots. So here also we're going to have some help from other people in a few years, I think, and that's also really, that helps investors gaining confidence about the company. And also, we put a lot of effort at NAIO Technologies on other topics like software navigation, for example, which is really important, and that has a lot of value, as well as safety issues, for example. So those arguments kind of counter the argument of hardware. Hardware is something that we've done to just get something out in the fields at first.
Céline, any additions to how you relate to investors who are expecting results maybe quicker than...
well, until now, we don't have yet investors. We had public ones, so we were quite lucky enough to have public grants and to help us develop our first 2 versions. But us, how we see it, well, we know that hardware is hard, and we know that if we were doing a software company, maybe it would be easier to raise money from investors. We are aware of that. And us, what we are doing is that our objective is to develop the prototype, well, to have a version that is convincing, you know. It will not be perfect, for sure, but at least to have a convincing version where the customers can see themselves buying the first commercial version. And if we have a version where we are sure that we have some customers that in 2 years will want to buy this product, we are pretty sure that the investors will follow. Well, not all of the investors, for sure, but some of them, yes.
I see a question up here.
Oui, bonjour, Jean Toby.
Yes, good morning, Jean Toby. I'm a consultant in agroforestry. If everything becomes electrical, very soon there might be a problem for recycling of the electrical batteries, and we're shifting a problem from fuel to rare earth. Have the manufacturers thought of looking at compressed air techniques developed by MDI, for example, or by Guinegre? These are techniques that work rather well. They're not very well developed, and I don't know why. There are presently equipments that are not autonomous, but for example, in Paris, they can collect the garbage with machinery that works with compressed air. Don't you think that could be usable and be much more positive environmentally over the long term? Well, this is a most interesting question, yes. Well, basically, we wanted to have a robot that worked with electrical energy, with electricity, because we felt it was the right time for transition, bringing a new technology to the field. And we opted for electricity, knowing that there's this problem of rare earth. But this was the most advanced technology that we could use for our robots while being certain that we wouldn't have any problems in the field. You have to know that the more innovative you are, we try to be innovative, but if you use a technology that might present a problem on your robot, then you might end up with lots of robots in the field that are not working for specific energy problems, energy issues. So once again, it's an issue of balancing between innovation and reliability. And it's quite important. Well, obviously, we continue looking into other solutions that could come as an addition to what we have, and that are even cleaner, because we know that there's this problem of electrical batteries on the cars and of rare earths. And we know that people who are aiming at full electrical solutions in robotics will have this problem. So we have to look into other technologies and test them as much as possible, but it's exactly like robots. You have to make sure and to see how ready this technology is for use and how it is going to work with a given yield. So it's a question that's not solved yet.
We have time probably just for one more question. I see one here in the middle.
Hi, Melanie Kimmer from IIV. My question is basically to José and Jean both. José, you mentioned that you would expect for lifelong support for the product. And Jean, you mentioned that you sold some of the products and you rented some of them out. So my question would be, José, would you be willing to pay for the lifelong support? I mean, if you buy a product like with software, you basically get a support contract. And John, how do you solve it? Like with the rental, I get it, you can just have a support with the rental, but if you sell the product, how do you solve the support issue?
Yes, we can pay for support, of course, but we need to see what will be the value of that support and what will be the cost. But it is something that makes sense for us. Of course, we need support. We paid actually support for another kind of technology services, and why not should be the same for robotic solutions.
So for the second part of your question, so yes, we've sold a few robots, and to exceptional people, I would say, because they were willing to take the risk to try those robots, even if at first they wouldn't work perfectly as they expected. But it's totally out of the question to leave them without any support. Even from some of them, it's not even written in the contract that they don't have a lifetime support. But we are still there in their fields every day when it doesn't work, because for us, it would be a really bad image if we wouldn't be there in the fields with them. We are kind of helping them, but they're also helping us building up those machines. Their feedback is important, so we do carry, I think we carry responsibility to be there and to support those robots until they're not happy anymore with it. So we'll be there till the end, I guess. So that means also hiring people, more and more people to go in the fields, and that's really a part of the growth of NAIO technology, is having field persons that really can communicate with the farmers, understand their needs, understand their expectations, and also understand when it doesn't work and when they're not happy.
I think that's just about all we have time for. Thank you very much for our panel, for being here, and thank you all for being here as well.